Welcome to Unlike-Minded, a sci-fi audio anthology.
The Misadventure of Jennifer Wright by Robbie, Hyne. Captain Jennifer Wright was a confident woman. Confident, and conceited, and arrogant, and smug, and vain, depending on who you asked. Systems, check. She'd risen fast in the ranks of the United Nations Space Force, stepping over anyone in her way, betraying any moral compass, if she even had one to begin with. Safety and backups, online. She was a new age vixen, an interstellar femme fatale, the type who preferred meaningless affairs to, other than in one particularly regrettable instance, deeper connection. Mission protocol set. She was smart, a self-starter, the kind of person who could manipulate facts, who could use others' brains to bolster her own natural charisma, who could sway people with only her allure. Launch is a go. But above all else, one thing was certain. Captain Jennifer Wright only looked out for herself. Ma'am? A male voice stuttered through Wright's comms. We don't have mission clearance yet. I gave you clearance, Hudlin, Wright fired back. Right, a female voice interrupted, shouting into Wright's comms. Oh, fuck it. She had her override ready. All it took now was the flip of a switch on her crossboard and a click of the blinking white button above her right shoulder. Launch door Alpha 2 opened, and Wright's Condor Class A took off into space. The stars were beautiful, beacons of light piercing through cold darkness. Wright always loved feeling closer to them, flying a Condor, Vulture, or Hawk, rather than being trapped in a large space cruiser like the UNSF Siren, with its endless parade of mindless workers, ants going about their days, she always thought. Wright let herself bask in the moment, if only for a moment, before focusing on her mission. Captain Wright, damn it, the female voice snapped over comms. Well, her mission. Major Letitia Rogers was everything Wright wasn't. Return to the Siren immediately. A respected leader, kind yet firm, intimidating in the kind of way where one would rather she be mad than disappointed. No debrief, no clearance, no mission readiness. She was intelligent, cunning, the underdog that everyone rooted for, even as she surpassed their wildest expectations and their ranks. I don't give a fuck who you think you are, Jennifer. You can't do this up. Wright tapped off comms. Alone. That's what she was going to say. Wright couldn't do this alone. But she could, if she must. So she swung the Condor toward her mission start. A large black hole several clicks away. It would be there that Wright would attempt the first ever hyperjump. Using the collected radiations of the accretion disk, she would be the first to jump across space, faster than even the speed of light, landing just outside Jupiter's orbit. In truth, Wright thought, no one, not even Letty, was better suited for this mission. This would be Wright's accomplishment, her name in the history books, her legacy. She alone had given everything for this moment. It was all she cared about, with every fiber of her being. Well, except for him. For Todd. No, she wouldn't think about him. Not now. Wright fired on all cylinders toward the black hole, tapping back into comms. I lost you for a sec, Letty. Had to reset the comm system. Do you copy? It's Major Rogers, your commanding officer. Letty was trying to keep her voice level, another skill she had that Wright lacked. Todd has always said that, no, stop. I'd write you up for that, Letty scolded. But fuck, at this point, you're already dishonorably discharged. Wright smiled to herself. How I see it, Major Rogers, you have a choice. You can help me complete the mission my way, or send those hawks you're prepping to shoot me down. How long would that set you back? You need my help converting the next Condor. There was a long silence on comms. Wright filled it. Tick-tock, Letty. Fine, Letty said after a while. We'll help you on this end for the mission's sake, and so I can throw you out an airlock after we succeed. The airlock on 20 Charlie? Wright teased. She could feel Letty blush, even though she couldn't see her. How Shakespearean. An alert sounded in the Condor. Wright was being hit with the first wave of Hawking radiation. She glided her fingers along the sensors, turning one off, another on, and adjusting two others. Excitement bubbled in her. She was nearing the black hole now. All right, Jen, came Letty's level voice again. Have it your way. She paused. Wright blushed. As you reach the fringes of the accretion disk, you'll need to perform an Ashley maneuver to position yourself correctly in orbit. Think you can handle that? She could, and she did, perfectly. In her success, she caught cheers over comms before Letty muted the sirens and Wright relished them. They echoed in her head. There would be more where those came from soon enough. In the silence that followed, Wright took some time to wonder at all the lights and colors that whooshed around her, like a godly painter's brush strokes. It was beyond anything she'd ever seen, beyond even those stars she loved so dearly. She took a deep breath, as if she could harness all that beauty, while also knowing, gratefully, that every bit of electromagnetic radiation was safely shielded by the Condor's upgraded shell. Her design, by the way. Ingenious at that. How are your readings? Letty asked. She silenced the left exterior alarm. The Geiger drive is collecting at a steady rate. X-rays, optical, infrared, radio, everything. It's amazing, Letty. You're clear to proceed. Wright could tell Letty had let her guard down. There was more Letty wanted to say. Wright could sense the ellipses at the end of her sentence. She waited, giving Letty the floor. Perhaps Wright was letting her guard down too. See you in the stars, Letty said finally. And for a moment, if only a moment, Wright felt like they were just two young specialist pilots again making their start together. Before they found their separate paths. Before Letty outranked her. This was their call and response from those days. Not if I see you. Crash! Wright's voice was drowned by deafening system alarms. The Condor had been hit. Wright caught a glimpse of the debris as she desperately tried to reorient and stabilize the ship. Command, she huffed. Major Rogers, I've been hit. Her heart sank. I've got multiple systems down. She wanted to vomit. Damage to the left thrusters and outer shell. Was she really going to admit defeat now? No, she couldn't. But Letty could. Comms cut in and out. Return, mission failure. Failure. Even the words stung. But damn it, Letty was right. There was no way, no time to get everything correctly secured and back online. All Wright could do was reposition and fire on backup cylinders to exit the... Wait. The Condor was stabilizing now. At least enough for her to realize. She was being pulled further into the black hole's orbit. Wham! More debris began hitting the ship, destabilizing it again. Wham! It was getting harder to offset, especially without left thrusters. Wham! 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 The Condor was spinning, careening toward the point of no return. No way backup thrusters were powerful enough to escape the gravitational pull. So that was it then. Mission failure. Wright's death. Unless... She looked at the ship's Geiger drive readings. 98%. A deep breath. Inner stabilization. Then Wright got to work. She was confident, after all. Confident and conceited and arrogant and smug and vain. In short, the makings of someone who could make it work. Or die in the delusion. 99%. Another deep breath. Wright would have only moments to attempt the jump. There was no time to wait, to process, or think. She just had to do. Maneuvering with the spin of the ship, then shutting off all thrusters at exactly the right time. 100%. One last deep breath. And then she punched it. In the next moment, every sensation within Captain Jennifer Wright's body and mind seemed to collapse within her. Pressure and weight like she'd never known, becoming unbearable, until just when she thought she might break apart, her Condor dropped back into space. Alarms blaring, lights flashing, monitors glitching, sparks flying. Wright focused on the stars piercing through the cold darkness outside the ship. She was alive, safe, somehow. There would be time to figure out how, provided she could keep the Condor in working condition long enough for the UNSF siren to find her. Surely she didn't end up where she was supposed to, the carefully estimated coordinates outside Saturn. Surely instead, she was lost in space. Nevertheless, Wright got to work, assessing damages, fixing what she could, muting alarms, resealing compartments, so on and so forth for what might have been hours but felt like minutes. Only when all seemed calm did Wright finally allow herself to rest. She hated it. She hated not having something more to do. She hated waiting, hoping, relying on others. But that was mission protocol, to wait, stay put, drift in space at her current bearings. What were her current bearings? Wright sank back in her captain's chair, noticing that the navigation system couldn't pinpoint where she'd landed. Instead, it shuffled through coordinates as if the ship were jumping continuously from one location to another. She tried resetting the system and watched as it loaded up again to the same result, endlessly shuffling coordinates. Taking manual control, Wright arced her condor around, searching the stars for clues to her whereabouts. But there was nothing. No Saturn, no other planets either. Wright turned to the comm system, emitting its pre-programmed SOS. It was sinking in now. If she jumped so far off course, off mission, away from the studied and carefully predicted hyperjump she was supposed to make, well, then there was a good chance the siren wouldn't be able to locate her. And even if they eventually did, would they be able to actually reach her to help? Not without attempting a similar hyperjump of their own, something they were not prepared for, especially without her. Wright swallowed hard. Was she going to admit defeat now? No, she still couldn't. She wouldn't. Not yet. But now, there was only time to wait. Had destiny brought her here to die alone, lost in space? To process. Had she failed, not just in her mission, but in her life? To think. What would everything add up to if she disappeared forever? What had she really accomplished? Who would feel her loss? Waiting. Would Todd? Processing. Would Letty? Thinking. Would anyone? The rest of Captain Jennifer Wright's first day lost in space was spent trying to recalibrate the navigation system. She pulled it apart piece by piece, dissected its inner workings, cords linking to ports, linking to power sources, linking to greater systems, a maze like the endless corridors of the siren. Everything seemed to be in working order. She checked and rechecked, yet still the monitor couldn't seem to reach a conclusion. Almost as if it could no longer read the universe around her. Like that universe was suddenly written in a completely different language, a different code, that her ship no longer recognized. Or was she going crazy? What would Letty say? The following day, Lost in Space, was dedicated to recalibrating the comm system. She rerouted backup power, sacrificed different systems, even simplified the distress code. Should she send another message? Should she leave behind her own last rites? Could she say something to Todd that would make up for... No point in lingering on that. On her third, fourth, and fifth days lost in space, Wright began to lose herself. Wasn't it ironic, she kept thinking, that she was finally as alone as she'd always felt? Everything, it seemed, was in steep decline. Her diminishing fuel supply, her waning rations, her general sanity. Everything except the Geiger drive. It's not that she hadn't noticed before, more that she hadn't believed it. Over the last several days, the drive's readings showed an increase in all forms of radiation, slowly at first, but unless she was mistaken, increasing exponentially. Still altogether slow, but faster with each passing day, hour, minute, up to that moment, where she was now, staring at it, almost full. How was that possible? Wright awoke later that night as the Condor suddenly lurched. She'd been dreaming about her return to the siren, about the cheering crowds, and him, Todd, pushing his way through all of it and everyone, to reach Wright, to... Systems began beeping, whirring, a crescendo so abrupt it made her head spin. What the fuck? At once, instinct told Wright to buckle in, just in time as suddenly, every sensation within Wright's body and mind collapsed once again within her, pressure and weight building to the unbearable, until just at her breaking point when the Condor dropped back into space. What the fuck? Wright instinctually began assessing the Condor, muting alarms, flipping off flashing lights and sensors, and resetting monitors. She moved swiftly, longing for silence. Then she saw it and stopped. The Geiger drive was charging again. From zero. How was that possible? And where had she... Crash! Something struck the Condor from behind, sending it careening to the left as Wright struggled to gain control. She stabilized, braking just as 2 shuttles flew past her. Wright couldn't believe her eyes. Had her prayers been answered? Had she somehow returned to the siren? The first shuttle braked and maneuvered to face her head-on, only she didn't recognize it. It wasn't a Condor, nor a vulture, nor a hawk. It was something else entirely. And that something was fully armed. She was under attack. But by who? And why? Wright's comms station blinked with new life. Lines of unidentifiable code filled its screen. Then the system reset, loading back to its usual settings, or so she thought. Listen to me very carefully, came the voice of Letitia Rogers. Letty? That really you? Wright responded, relief washing over her. Commander Wright, she continued, unbothered. Commander? Rogers ignored her. You're surrounded, out of options, and if you attempt to flee again, we will have no choice but to shoot you down. What's going on? Wright asked. Don't play dumb now, sneered another male voice. How pathetic. We are overriding your ship's mainframe to bring you in, Rogers continued. Do not fight us on that. By her command, one by one, the Condor's monitors began resetting with lines of unrecognizable code. Wright waited a moment, then noticed rather curiously that each of those resets failed, one after another after another. What the hell did you do to your ship, Wright? The man's voice rang out again. Hudlin? Wright recognized it now. That's Major Hudlin to you. Hudlin was none too pleased. You think you'd show me some goddamn respect with your ass on the line? I'm not as patient as Major Sergeant Rogers. Okay, now Wright was really confused. Major Sergeant? Major? Commander? There was no way their ranks had shifted that much in a week. Unless, had more time passed for them? Months? Years? Decades even? Had she not been jumping just through space, but through time? No, it couldn't be. That was impossible. And besides, if that were the case, why did it sound like they'd been chasing her through the stars? Why were they hunting her in the first place? Why hadn't she been missing? She watched as her systems began resetting again. Her eyes slid to the Geiger drive as it reached 50%. Her head was throbbing, but in that moment she knew the Condor was going to jump again. When Wright looked back up, everything seemed suddenly upside down. The people, the ships, even the stars. Wright tried to process what was happening, but she needed time to wait, process, and think. Time she wouldn't have these people, whoever they were, took control of her Condor. Another reset attempt. She watched it happen, connecting two faraway dots in her throbbing head. Their systems couldn't read her Condors, as if her ship were operating in a completely different language than their own, a completely different code that theirs couldn't recognize. Another attempt. They had managed to access her comms, though, perhaps because she had so successfully simplified the system. The Geiger drive reached 60%. Major Sergeant Rogers? Wright swallowed hard, positioning herself over her controls. I'm sorry. Wright thrusted forward, performing another perfect Ashley maneuver to dodge around Rogers' ship. Damn it, Rogers snapped. Wright smiled. That sounded more like her Letty, her friend. She tapped off comms and shot off into space. Sorry, Letty, she mused to herself. I lost you there. The ships were already in pursuit, at least 3 by Wright's account, led by Major Sergeant Rogers. Wright's Geiger drive read 65%. She didn't need to lose them forever, just long enough for the drive to reach 100. Even on backup thrusters, she was fast. Good. No. Great. 70%. Wright outmaneuvered the others at every turn. 80%. Pride swelled within her. 90%. Hours felt like minutes. She was going to make it. Just a little wham! A direct hit sent the Condor tumbling. Wright laughed hysterically as she restabilized and found herself once again facing off with Rogers' ship. 95%. Wright reached for her weapon system. She didn't want to fire, but if that were her only way out, what choice did she have? 96%. Rogers was just a few clicks ahead of her. 97%. Closing in fast. 98%. Her weapons charged. Damn it, Wright had to act. 99%. Her finger hovered over the trigger. But at the last second, all power through the Condor failed. In complete and total darkness, Wright smiled. If she were going to die, this was the way she wanted it to happen. Not lost in space, slow and agonizing and alone, but by the hand of someone who had finally bested her. Someone she respected, maybe even cared for. Rogers charged her final shot. Then suddenly, the Geiger drive kicked back to life, shining through the dark of the ship like a guiding star. And just as Rogers was about to fire, sensations collapsing, body and mind, pressure, weight, the Condor dropped back into space and swayed as a giant spaceship passed overhead, the size of 3 UNSF cruisers. Wright studied it, breathing deeply, following its course to a large planet with shades of brown along the surface that mingled with baby blue water and crimson clouds that filled its sky. It was magnificent. Wright stared in absolute awe. Smaller vessels moved to and from the surface of the planet, some jumping away into space, others docking aboard distant stations. She had discovered life beyond Earth, the greatest of achievements, a legacy surely, if she ever made it home. Wright reached for her comm tablet, checking the SOS signal, steady and strong. Still no ship acknowledged her. Wright looked back to the planet. For a moment, she became so lost in it all that she wondered if it were her final frontier. Perhaps there were greater accomplishments to be had in a place like this, a greater legacy even. Beyond Earth. Beyond. All she left behind. She reached back to comms, tapping in via her headset. Does anyone read me? Silence. My name is Captain Jennifer Wright. Silence. Was she really going to say it? I come in peace. Silence. So this time, Wright thought, she was surrounded by life, and yet still somehow just as alone as her first drop out of hyperspace. She was more confused than ever at what was happening to her condor, and these continuous hyperjumps, jumping through space, or time, or some combination? Wait. Her eyes landed on the Geiger drive, already nearing 62%. It couldn't have been more than an hour since she dropped out of the last jump. 70%. The drive was charging faster than ever before. 80%. She stared. She didn't know how to stop it. 90%. With a few deep breaths, she looked out at that beautiful planet before her, deciding to memorize every detail she could before. Sensations collapsing, body and mind, overpowering pressure and weight. The Condor dropped back into space. Wright sank back in her captain's chair to look out at the stars, as if maybe, after everything, they held the answers. And maybe they did. There were fewer in this place. They didn't seem to shine as brightly. Blink, blink, blink. Wright's eyes caught the subtle blue light on her comms tablet. She tapped in, pressing play. Hey, Jen. The voice rang through the ship. Wright felt a sharp pain piercing through her body. She recognized the voice just as she had with Rogers and Hudlin. They told me this might reach you in time. I think they want me to comfort you, knowing, well, you know. Tears welled in Wright's eyes. She wanted to reach out, to turn the message off. Could it really be him? I don't know if I can, to be honest, the message continued. I think they want me to tell you that I love you, and I do, of course I do, but does that matter? Wright felt dizzy at the very thought of it. Of course it mattered. Or did it? Maybe it does now. Maybe in the end you're facing everything your life amounted to. She was, and didn't. That too. I have always loved you, Jen, but you always loved your career, your missions, your aspirations, more than anything else, even me. Wright's head fell into her hands, at once feeling a deeper weight than any of her hyperjumps, an emotional anchor pulling her down, down, down. I think maybe this is how it was meant to happen. Maybe this is the way you want to go. Maybe. The message cut off. Sensations collapsing, the Condor dropped back into space. Everything was just as it had been with each and every drop before. Alarms blaring, lights flashing, monitors glitching, sparks flying. But this time, this drop, Wright was different. She couldn't bring herself to turn anything off. She just sat there in the noise, in that contained chaos. Through it all, she noticed her comms tablet was blinking to life again. Her tear-filled eyes drifted to it. It wasn't a message. It was live comms. Only now she didn't want it to be Rogers or Hudlin or anyone else, or any version of them. She just wanted Todd. Any Todd. Finally, she tapped in. Cheers erupted from the other end. Congratulations and bravas and hoots and hollers. You did it, called her unrecognizable voice. You Wright tapped back out of comms. Succeeded. That's what she was going to say. And that was exactly what she couldn't face for the first time in her life. Wright's eyes moved expectantly to the Geiger drive. Only a few minutes left. Before? Another hyperjump, exactly like those before it. The Condor dropped back into space, only Wright wasn't in space this time. She was gliding along the surface of an endless ocean. She peered out longingly. All she could think to do was throw herself out of the ship into the rough waters. Would that be enough to end this nightmare? Would she die, finally at home? Another jump. She was back in the stars. Another jump. She was hovering over a large asteroid. Another jump. She was back just outside Earth, or a version of it. Another jump. She couldn't take it any longer. Another. She felt like she was going to explode. Another. She did explode in a sense, rage within her bursting forth as she took whatever moment she had to unlock her emergency firearm. And bang, bang, bang. She fired into the Geiger drive over and over and over again until tears overtook her sight and the firearm had only a single bullet left. Then she sat back, not looking out at the stars, eyes closed, hoping, praying she'd reach the end of it, and knowing either way she might need that last one shot. After some time, she opened her eyes, and that's when she realized her Condor was docking aboard some sort of station. At first, the relief of staying put, wherever, whenever, however she was, washed over her, but it was quickly overtaken. Wherever, whenever, however. She unbuckled herself and stood, facing the back of the ship. The Condor touched down in the station's landing bay, and the sealed door opened to a small group of people. They didn't seem surprised to see her or even that she was wielding a firearm. They didn't cheer or say much of anything at all. They simply looked at her until they were forced to make way for someone pushing through their ranks. "Hello, Jennifer," said Letitia Rogers as she stepped beyond them. "You can put your gun down." Wright hesitated, then lowered the gun. Whoever this was, she shared her Letty's comforting eyes. Not just their deep, beautiful blue, but the stars she'd always seen within them. From the first moment they met, from their training together, their first space flights, their burgeoning friendship, from the Siren's airlock on 20 Charlie, that night, 20 years ago. "So, which one are you?" Rogers asked. "Sorry?" Rogers sighed. "Right, well, let's just get into it then. I'm Admiral Letitia Rogers. Not sure if you know me in your universe." "In my universe?" It was all Wright could muster. "I'm assuming, Jennifer Wright, that you were on some sort of mission involving the use of black hole radiations to attempt a super jump. Is that right?" Rogers didn't need to wait for confirmation. "Primitive," she all but scolded. "But many of your variants find themselves on that mission. From what I gather, it hardly ever goes according to plan. And how do I put this simply? This universe, our universe, this station, seems to be a kind of waypoint." "I don't think I understand. I'm not in my universe?" "Well, see, that is a complicated question." She paused. "As I've come to think about it, technically, you never left your universe. You're still passing through the black hole on your jump. And for whatever reason, as you do, you also seem to be dropping into some of your other variants' existences across the multiverse. I'm not sure I really understand that part myself." "Admiral Rogers," Wright interjected, "all due respect, all I want is to go home." "Is that really all you want?" she nudged, like a school teacher guiding her pupil to the correct answer. "Rather than being in charge of everything and everyone, rather than looking out only for yourself at all times always, rather than creating a legacy for the history books, you just want to find your place in your universe?" "Yes," said Wright. "Well, lucky for you, Jennifer. Though you're popping in and out of these other universes, like I said before, a part of you never really left your own. If I had to guess, when you return, your mission will be a success." She let that sink in, watching for even the slightest reaction, as if even the notion of mission success would bring Wright back to who she had been, to what she had wanted before. But that person was gone. Left behind perhaps in one of her so-called variants. All she wanted was to go home. Rogers remarked. "It's only a matter of time before you're pulled back to your reality, to discover where you've ended up, I suppose." "So what do I do?" "You get back on your ship." "I destroyed the Geiger drive." "Did you? Are you sure?" Wright looked over her shoulder at the Condor. "One more piece of advice," Rogers added. "You're capable of all that you need. Always have been." "How do you know that? How do you know all of this? How did you figure it out?" "Our Captain Wright seems to be trapped in this loop. Every time she lands on this station, a different version of her seems to slip in. Our Captain Wright's a good woman. Confident, hardworking, smart, a self-starter, and the type of woman who loves fiercely. I'm not her." "No, but you can be like her," she smiled. "Goodbye, Jennifer." With that, Rogers turned on her heels and left back through the crowd. Wright re-entered her ship, strapping back into her captain's chair. She looked at the Geiger drive, smashed to pieces. Still, somehow, she trusted the process. She trusted this Letitia Rogers, just as deep down, she'd always trusted her own. Wright reached out to the drive's manual control. A deep breath, inner stabilization. Then, she punched it. In the next moment, every sensation within Captain Jennifer Wright's body and mind collapsed within her. Pressure and weight like she'd known through each and every jump so far. Painful but bearable, because she knew on the other end what she had to do. The Condor dropped back into space. Jennifer moved through the Condor, muting alarms, flipping off flashing lights and sensors, and resetting monitors, getting everything into place for whatever was to happen next. Then she sat back in her chair and waited, for what might have been minutes, but felt like hours. Wright thought of Letty, of rebuilding their friendship and serving honorably under her command. Then of Todd, sweet Todd. Wright thought about him for a long time, about all she would say to him back on Earth, about how she would apologize and how she would kiss him and hold him close and love him fiercely and never let him go. Her comms tablet finally blinked to life with an incoming transmission. You did it, came Roger's voice. You fucking did it. Cheers drowned her out. She didn't mute them. Jennifer blushed. Rogers didn't seem angry or upset. She sounded proud, like everything had gone according to plan. Listen, we've locked onto your ship's signal and we're headed your way. It will be a while, but we're coming, okay? Send us a transmission when you get this. Jennifer couldn't help but laugh, relief pouring out of her body. She sat back, staring out into the stars. Those safe, beautiful stars. We'll see you soon, Admiral Wright. And with those simple words, Jennifer's smile faltered.
This has been Unlike Minded, a sci-fi audio anthology. Collection 2, A Traveler's Guide, stories about space, time, and other worlds. The Misadventure of Jennifer Wright was written by Robbie Hyne and narrated by Kaley Cuoco. Unlike Minded is an August year-round production, created, produced, and edited by Robbie Hyne. We'd like to give a special thank you to everyone who has supported this independent podcast production. You can keep up to date and find more info about this podcast and others on Instagram at the handle AugustYearRoundProd or email us at augustyearround@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe, leave a rating and review, and tune in next week for another episode of Unlike Minded. Thank you for listening.